Nitram is a grim, cold but sober picture of the man responsible for the Port Arthur massacre, a mass shooting that in Australia in 1996 saw 35 people killed and 23 more wounded. This is Australian director Justin Kurzel's fifth feature film. 4 of his 5 movies explore similar themes and subjects. Assassin's Creed is the odd one out in his filmography in a few ways, but Snowtown, The True History of the Kelly Gang, and now Nitram are based on true stories of violence in Australian history.
Morning, Dave.
I'm John. How you doing?
And adding Macbeth too, Kurzel has made a series of movies centred on disturbed, violent men and narratives structured like true literary tragedies, that move with a steady pace towards inevitable disaster. There was and is some controversy surrounding the very existence of this film. It's believed Martin Bryant, the shooter, was partly motivated to commit his crime by a desire for notoriety. After his arrest, he was denied access to any news reports to prevent him or any others in the future from thinking they could achieve any satisfaction from that sort of notoriety. And this is still a consideration today when any media covers this event. The Port Arthur massacre is also, of course, still a traumatic, not distant enough memory for many Australians. So it is a difficult, sensitive topic for a film. My view is that a good film is always a positive thing, though, even on the most difficult of topics. A good film should promote thoughtful reflection and may provide new insights into whatever issue it explores. Kurzel's style here, though, is not particularly argumentative or persuasive. It doesn't push any particular point or attempt to reveal any new angle or idea. It does function as an anti-gun piece, not just because it is about a mass shooting, but with key moments deliberately depicting the ease, for example, with which an unstable person without a license could acquire a gun in 96 Australia. Writer Sean Grant apparently penned this screenplay while living in LA during a time when shootings were happening near his home. So it is an anti-gun film. However, most of the film is not, I think, pushing an agenda, an emotion, or even any specific ideas or insights about this event. I think instead what it's trying to do is offer a calm, cold, disturbing account of the events leading up to the shooting and a relatively dispassionate view of the man who carried it out. So in this respect, it's in the vein of films like Gus Van Sant's Elephant, and Kazda and Weinreb's I, Olga Hepnarova, which is a 2017 Czech movie I watched recently and liked. It'll also draw comparisons, Nitram, to Lynn Ramsey's We Need to Talk About Kevin, but I think that film is different and probably better in a few key ways. But I think it's distinct from those others on the list. Elephant, I, Olga, and Nitram have a common, depressed, deterministic mode from the outset. There's an inevitability to proceedings in those 3. We know what's coming. The film is about the experience of sliding down into that predetermined end point or hole. We Need to Talk About Kevin is a bit more complex tonally too, I think. It shifts and surprises in ways the others don't. Maybe partly because its story is fictional, so the outcome was less known by audiences. But even aside from that, it doesn't have quite the same cold and detached tone and mechanical pace as, say, Nitram. There's more emotion too in We Need to Talk About Kevin. Not that the story should generate more emotion, but in the style and the storytelling, there is more deliberate, I think, will to make us feel, for example, Tilda Swinton's character's fears as a mother.
I never can forget the day.
Nitram, though, like Elephant and Olga, employs a more detached, unemotional style. The tragic history and the film's end is already written. All we can do is experience the process. A steady, sober camera watches mental health deteriorate and violent urges build or just play out as they were always going to in its characters. Caleb Landry Jones as Nitram lumbers around his local streets, depicted in turn as childlike, animalistic, and also as conscious decision-making adult. Like a wild dog, he's constantly seeking, hunting something. Sensory pleasures, for example, with his head out the window of a moving car. Social interaction and attention, for example, lying to potential friends about being a surfer or bragging about being a wealthy businessman. And then ultimately seeking a distorted and disturbed vengeance and fame. His depiction as a shaggy, wild animal perhaps extends further than just that image of Jones with his head out the car window. In another scene, for example, after misbehaving during the test drive of a car his friend, Helen, is considering buying, the salesperson shoves his head down into the dashboard like a tough owner pressing his dog's nose into the mess they've made. But he's not simply a beast, he's not simply depicted as animal. Jones's performance is rich, conveying deep reserves of anxiety, depression, rage, confusion. There are a few striking moments of artful cinematography. These kind of God's eye view shots from a great height of Nitram, for example, driving down long, winding roads, suggest a character set in his course to destruction, while we are kept at a great distance and can only watch as this inescapable tragedy plays out like a car wreck in slow motion. These shots, from the perspective of a distant camera gliding along above a deeply troubled man hurtling towards oblivion, are reminiscent too of Stanley Kubrick's similarly cold, long-range views of his also disturbed, ill-fated characters. In particular, these shots remind of the eerie and atmospheric opening of The Shining. Much later in the film, we're given a similar high and distant view of people walking, settling in for their afternoons in the tourist location of Port Arthur, Tasmania. These shots show these victims to be as like ants, vulnerable and small, while we as spectators are held far back, frustratingly unable to reach out to them. Critics of this type of film inevitably say it offers no insight or it makes no new judgment or point. So why does it exist? It's just exploitative. This, for example, was Roger Ebert's response to Elephant back in 2003. I love Ebert, but I disagreed with that review. I mean, I do agree that this, like those others I mentioned, Elephant, we need to talk about Kevin, I Happen Rover, isn't really about making a strong political or moral point throughout, or do any of them offer any brilliant new insights into psychopaths or mass murders. But I don't expect them to. Everyone already knows the point. If the point is murder is bad, or they already have their position on the relevant political issues like gun laws, for which I guess some may change in response to better understanding events like this. But people who have a set position on gun laws, I think, aren't going to be swayed by this movie being more political, emotive, or agenda-driven, having more of a point to make. I mean, it's often just a taste thing, isn't it? How you like your directors to approach these kinds of subjects. I happen to be a real sucker for the slow cinema, arty style, particularly as an approach to really serious, difficult subjects. I like that unemotional depiction or exploration of issues where you're not hearing the director's voice telling you what to think about A, B, or C. You just see and experience A, B, and C, and you reach your own thoughts and opinions. By contrast, a director who puts their imprint on a complex issue, and whether through editing, music, narration, whatever, performances, tells you what to think about a really serious issue, I tend to react against that approach. There are a couple of elements of Nitram that I thought Kurzel didn't follow through with that kind of purity. One is the title. I don't love the title, the idea of making up this story that Martin Bryant was called or teased with the nickname Nitram. He's named Martin backwards, presumably mainly to avoid saying his name, to avoid calling the movie Martin, given those issues around the danger of feeding into Martin Bryant's desire for notoriety or any potential killer's desire for notoriety. It's held up in particular by 4 very strong performances. I mean, Caleb Landry Jones won Best Actor at Cannes for this role. I read that Texan actor Jones, when he travelled to Australia for this film, spent his time in quarantine, which would I guess be a couple of weeks, watching non-stop mid-90s episodes of Neighbours, Home and Away, and Hey Hey It's Saturday to help hone his accent. I don't envy him that experience, but the homework has paid off because his accent and his performance on the whole here is great, I think. I can see why he won that Cannes Best Actor award. Judy Davis too is equally strong as the character seemingly most aware of the potential for evil in her son, but paralysed by inaction, inability, or perhaps exhaustion. Anthony LaPaglia is also really effective as Nitram's father, who tries to care for him as best he can, but is beaten down again and again by multiple forces. Essie Davis's performance as the Tatslotto heiress, who befriends Nitram, is also really strong, though perhaps the most affected here. But from all reports, this eccentricity is a pretty authentic representation of this intriguing figure, Helen Harvey, who invited Bryant to live with her. So for me, these films are effective if they offer an artistic exploration of, and in doing so provide some attempt to better understand, or at least observe, the real horrors that do exist in the world, such as mass murder and its contributing factors. The contributing factors that this film does raise, if only briefly, are social and mental health issues inadequately treated by the medical system, but also individuals inadequately supported by social structures, and it also raises the issue of the opportunity for mass violence being inadequately prevented by legal commercial systems, by the ability to shop for guns. But as I say, I don't think raising those issues, those kind of political or explanatory things is the purpose of this movie as much as in the kind of marketing. I think it's been pitched, and Kurzel and the writer have said that it is designed as an anti-gun film, and that's there. I don't think it's its main function. I think this is an art film really about the experience of the build-up to horror, build-up to trauma and disaster. And on that level, I think it works well. It's artful, it's stylish, it's incredibly well performed, well made, and it's a real experience, even if not much of a fun one. It's probably a 4 out of 5 for me.